You're not lost, even if it feels that way right now. You're simply standing in a space most people pass through quietly, a space where the old version of you has loosened its grip, and the next version hasn't fully stepped forward yet. And because there is no clear label for this place, the mind often calls it confusion, when in truth, it is transition. Being between versions of yourself doesn't feel poetic while you're inside it. It feels disorienting, heavy, and strangely lonely, because the familiar habits, goals, and ways of thinking that once gave you direction no longer fit the way they used to. Yet the future version of you hasn't given you clear instructions either. So you're left navigating with fewer certainties than you're used to. This is often the phase where people say, "I don't know who I am anymore." Not because identity is gone, but because identity is being updated. And updates require a temporary shutdown of old systems before new ones can run properly, which can feel unsettling when you're used to continuity and clarity. Growth doesn't always arrive as motivation or excitement. Sometimes it arrives as doubt, restlessness, and the quiet realization that the life you've been living no longer matches who you're becoming. And the mind struggles here because it prefers stability over accuracy, familiarity over truth. When you're between versions of yourself, confusion isn't a failure of direction. It's a sign that your inner compass is recalibrating. And recalibration requires stillness, patience, and moments where the path forward isn't immediately visible. Old roles begin to dissolve in this phase. The version of you that always pleased others, the one that stayed small to stay safe, the one that followed expectations without questioning whether they still made sense. And when these roles loosen, there's a brief sense of emptiness, because they once gave you structure, even if they limited you. Habits start to feel hollow too, not because they were wrong, but because they were built for a version of you that no longer exists. And letting go of them can feel like losing control, when in reality, you're making room for alignment. This is why emotional discomfort shows up so strongly during periods of real growth, because the nervous system is adjusting to unfamiliar territory, and the mind is learning to live without its old reference points, which can feel like standing on moving ground. Feeling disconnected doesn't mean you're regressing. It often means you're shedding layers that once kept you functioning, but no longer allow you to grow. And the shedding process isn't graceful. It's quiet, awkward, and deeply internal. People often assume that feeling lost means you've made the wrong choices, but more often it means you've outgrown the reasons behind your old ones. And the space between outgrowing and rebuilding is where uncertainty naturally lives. This phase asks for honesty more than action, for listening more than fixing, because rushing to define yourself too quickly can pull you back into old patterns simply because they're familiar, not because they're true. Patience here isn't passive, it's active trust. Trust that clarity doesn't always arrive as a sudden realization, but as a slow return of inner steadiness, where choices begin to feel simpler, not because life is easier, but because you're more aligned. Self-honesty becomes essential in this space, because pretending to be fine or forcing certainty only delays the real work, which is allowing yourself to admit that you're changing, even if you don't yet know what that change will look like. You're not meant to have everything figured out while you're between versions of yourself. You're meant to notice what no longer feels true, what drains you instead of energizing you, and what parts of your old identity you've been carrying out of habit rather than authenticity. There is wisdom in this discomfort, not because suffering is necessary, but because awareness deepens when certainty loosens, and many people only meet their truest values when they are no longer distracted by familiar roles. This phase doesn't ask you to believe in miracles or promises. It asks you to stay present, to move slowly, and to respect the fact that meaningful change often happens below the surface, long before it shows on the outside. So if you feel unsure, disconnected, or strangely quiet inside, understand that this doesn't mean you've lost yourself. It means you're listening more closely than before, and listening takes time. You are not broken, behind, or failing at life. You are simply in the middle of becoming someone more honest, more grounded, and more aligned than the version you're leaving behind. And one day, without a dramatic moment or clear announcement, you'll notice that your thoughts feel steadier, your choices feel lighter, and your direction feels natural again. Not because you forced it, but because you allowed yourself the grace to grow through uncertainty. Until then, let this phase be what it is, not a problem to solve, but a passage to walk through. And trust that clarity returns not when you chase it, but when you're ready to live it.